This week, 61 impacted versions of Apache Struts let off security advisories. A hacker has released publicly a jailbreak for iOS version 12.4. Chrome users are ignoring warnings about passwords. An unpatchable security flaw found in a popular SOC or system on a chip. A reward for up to $30,000 for finding flaws in Microsoft's new web browser. In the expert commentary, we welcome Jason Wood from Paladin Security to discuss ransomware and city governments. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Too many alerts and not enough action? It's time to get SaltStack. SaltStack is an intelligent IT automation platform that detects security issues in critical business systems and then actually fixes them. With SaltStack, security and IT teams work together to define custom security policies with certified checks for CIS, DISA-STIGs, and more. You can scan systems for millions of compliance checks in minutes. Remediate compliance and vulnerability issues with powerful automation, all in a single platform. Visit securityweekly.com/SaltStack to learn more. Welcome everyone to Hack Naked News, episode number 230 for August 20th, 2019. I'm of course your host, Paul Asadorian, with exciting news about our Security Weekly webcast program. We're partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you've attended or want to attend any of our upcoming webcasts or watch the archive, you'll be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast simply by registering for the upcoming webcast. The next one is with Zane Lackey of Signal Sciences. And another one after that is Ian McShane from Endgame. Or, you could register for both, right? Go to securityweekly.com/webcast and find the archive at securityweekly.com/on-demand. And now, for the security news, 61 impacted versions of Apache Struts left off security advisories. And there's more. Security researchers from Synopsys actually have reviewed security advisories for Apache Struts and found that 24 of them inaccurately listed affected versions for the open source development framework. The advisories have been since been updated, and vulnerabilities in an additional 61 unique versions of Struts that were affected by at least one previously disclosed vulnerability have been updated. They've also, those are the ones the vulnerabilities are left off. The extent of analysis was performed by Black Duck, part of Synopsys now. They investigated 115 distinct releases for Apache Struts and correlated those against 57 existing Apache Struts security advisories covering 64 vulnerabilities. Sounds like a very tedious task. Some versions were originally identified as vulnerable, but were not. My comment is basically, what a mess. So that's been updated. So if you're running Struts, you may want to go check and see if you're vulnerable or not. VxWorks TCP/IP stack vulnerability, according to one report, poses a major manufacturing risk. The report points out that VxWorks is embedded in more than 2 billion devices. Shalom Bubble, co-founder and chief risk officer at Cover, says the pervasiveness of VxWorks was eye-opening. According to the report, Cover took into account the specifics of company attributes and multiplied that score by the number of VxWorks instances on the ground at the company's facility. In the example of a theoretical automobile manufacturer, the result is a financial risk of, I believe that says $7.2 million, Using the same formula applied to a larger set of industrial companies, Covert calculates a total financial risk of nearly $19 billion. Interesting math and speculation. However, it doesn't take into account any compensating controls or what data an attacker might gain access to if compromised, which is not only unique to the company, but unique to each device. A hacker publicly releases a jailbreak for iOS version 12.4. During the weekend, experts discovered that the latest version of iOS 12.4, released in June, has reintroduced a security flaw found by Google Project Zero, white hat hacker, that was previously fixed in 12.3. The flaw potentially exposes iPhone devices running current and older iOS versions, any 11.x, 12.x, below 12.3, to the risk of a hack until the 12.4.1 will be released. The popular researcher Pwn20 whatever, it's in the show notes, who already has developed iPhone jailbreaks in the past, today published a jailbreak for iOS 12.4. Some users claim the jailbreak works on their iPhones. I find it interesting that they reintroduced a security flaw, which means there's some flaws in the agile or not so agile development that Apple is doing, and that check obviously was not added into their test or was missed by the test that they wrote for that original vulnerability. Hackers planted a backdoor in Webmin, a popular utility for Linux and Unix servers. Following the story is interesting here because, excuse me, there was a disclosure of a critical zero-day vulnerability in Webmin. The project's maintainers revealed that later the flaw was not actually the result of a coding mistake made by the programmers. Instead, it was secretly, well, now not so secretly, planted by an unknown hacker who successfully managed to inject a backdoor at some point in the build infrastructure that surprisingly persisted into various releases of Webmin, 1.882 through 1.921, and eventually remained hidden for over a year. The research was presented by a Turkish security researcher at DEF CON on August 10th. The project maintainers did not know about this until it was made public. I believe there's some ethical considerations here, among other points in this story, including those ethical points for the researcher, perhaps the DEF CON conference itself. Now, it's difficult to control who's releasing what vulnerabilities and what level of due diligence they did surrounding disclosure. However, asking whether or not you've attempted to work with the software or its maintainers or the company to get vulnerabilities fixed before presenting on stage could be a good measure to go through if you're running a conference. Of course, a conference as large as DEF CON, that is extremely difficult just to get all those presentations processed, never mind figure out if they did any due diligence with regards to vulnerability disclosure. And then what should the accepted vulnerability disclosure policy be for those presenting at the conference? We could do a whole segment just on that. The other thing is this vulnerability was not from, again, a poor coding practice, but someone slipped some code into their infrastructure that persisted for a year. That's a completely different problem to deal with, and one that is obviously difficult for Webmin and many software projects and companies that make software today. The Pwn Star State. I just love the title, and we just can't get over the image. The register is just like way off the charts, like ridiculously actually funny on this one, and I'll give them props because we thought the title, The Pwn Star State, was funny, although ransomware isn't funny when it impacts municipalities' infrastructure, and we'll be talking about that in our expert commentary today. GitHub now scans commits for Atlassian, Dropbox, and Discord tokens. This is great, as I'm currently looking into Amazon AWS Secrets Manager. There's also HashiCorp and Conjur and other options available for secrets management. However, GitHub is initially scanning commits for token formats associated with Alibaba, AWS, Azure, Google, Mailgun, Node Package Manager, Slack, and a whole host of others. The company said on Monday it's also added the Atlassian, Dropbox, Discord, and others to its list of partners, stating now if you accidentally check in a token for products like Jira or Discord, the provider gets notified about a potential match within seconds of check-in, allowing them to revoke tokens before it's used maliciously. I think this is a good thing. It's certainly a common problem in code that, as we're discussing today, is not necessarily a very easy engineering problem to overcome if you haven't implemented a secrets vault. Not the end of the world, but it involves some engineering inside of your software application. I guess now doing development, I sympathize being in this situation. Videoland patches dozens more vulnerabilities in VLC. This makes me really not want to use VLC any longer, but are there alternatives that are any better than VLC security-wise? I'm really just asking for a friend. Chrome users are ignoring warnings to change breached passwords. According to Google, only 1 in 4 of its users of its password checkup Chrome extension decided to do just that, actually change their password when they told them it was either compromised or a really poor password like 12345. In 1 month alone, Google says it scanned 21 million usernames and passwords, flagging 316,000 or 1.5% as having been part of a breach. A state that excludes trivial passwords such as 12345. I should say so. They did not include trivial passwords, which the tool doesn't warn against to avoid overstating the obvious. I kind of think it should check for things like that, but obviously it does not, according to the article. There is some good news, though. 60% of those who changed their potentially compromised passwords chose ones that would be hard to guess. I'm not sure how they determined what was hard to guess or not, but according to Google, 60% chose what they deem as good passwords. Announcing the Microsoft Edge Insider Bounty, Microsoft Security Response Center. We welcome researchers, they say, to seek out and disclose any high-impact vulnerabilities they may find in the next version of Microsoft Edge, which is based on Chromium. They're offering up a $30,000 reward for eligible vulnerabilities in dev and beta channels. They aim to complement the Chrome Vulnerability Reward Program, so any report that reproduces on the latest version of Edge but not Chrome will be reviewed for bug bounty eligibility based on severity, impact, and report quality. Great, but can someone please fix the horrible performance of Chrome, which may be in the Chromium framework itself, or maybe just how Chrome or Google has implemented it? Maybe Microsoft's implementation will be better. Who knows? I want my CPU and RAM cycles back. And, fix those security holes, too. And good luck with all that. An unpatchable security flaw is found in the popular system on a chip. Unpatchable flaws are bad. Attackers are able to tamper with the boot header in the early stages of the boot procedure, can modify its contents to execute arbitrary code, therefore bypassing the security measures offered by the encrypt-only mode, said F-Secure's Adam Pilkey. Researchers also found a second bug while the first was in the boot header parsing performed by the boot ROM, which is the unpatchable one. The second bug was in the parsing of the partition header tables. The second bug allowed hackers to run arbitrary code, but again, unlike the first, it was patchable. Linux did not release a software fix for the second bug, as attackers could always bypass the patch, the company, or reverse engineer the patch and create an exploit from it. Of course, if you have an exploit for the first one, it's not patchable. So good luck with that. Hopefully they come up with some compensating controls. We'll take a short break, come back with expert commentary from Jason Wood. Stay tuned. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. We're here with Jason Wood from Paladin Security. Jason, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Good to be back with you.
And we're talking about horses being succumbed to phishing attacks, I think is what the image in that Register article was implying.
Either that or it was checking out the news or something. I don't know. That horse was really interested in what was happening on the keyboard.
Very interested.
I don't get it, but it was hilarious.
It was
I got a good laugh out of it. Just, you look at the article, you start to read down, your eyes go back up like, wait, what?
It's very distracting.
So The news itself, as much fun as Paul and I have had with the article at the Register, really kind of is not so good for at least 23 cities in the state of Texas. And really, they're just the latest to be hit by ransomware aimed at municipal governments. What's interesting about this attack is 23 cities were basically hit in what appears to be a coordinated attack. According to a statement, or several statements rather, by the Department of Information Resources for the state of Texas, they started getting reports from the cities on the morning of August 16th, Friday. And by the next day, they had updated that to, it's saying basically they had 23 different municipalities that were hit. And they had marshaled quite a list of organizations to respond to and deal with this. Now, I thought it was interesting and good that the state at least had a mechanism for these municipalities to report in, start coordinating things. Like I said, the list of departments that they have involved is kind of lengthy. I think it's 9 named organizations at the state and federal level, plus other unnamed, in quote, federal cybersecurity partners, whatever that is. Now, as you've been following the news, like I said, Texas is hardly the first state to be hit with this type of attack against their cities that have crippled services to the residents there. Some previous well-known attacks include Baltimore had a big one recently. Atlanta had one last year, I think it was. San Francisco had the attack on their subway system, and those were all locked up by ransomware. What it's basically coming down to is the bad guys are discovering that crime, in fact, does pay, at least in this case. Now, one of the questions somebody may ask as they're looking at this is, why are we hearing about this all of a sudden happening at different cities all around the country and probably all around the world, realistically? And really, I think the answer lies in the economics of the situation. City governments really don't have a lot of IT budget, as I think of the city that I live in. You know, they offer different services to the residents to rent out different facilities, to pay utilities, you know, report different things that are happening, things like that. But I imagine the IT department is very small, and as they don't. Cities are, you know, devoting most of their money to things like roads, emergency services, and things like that. And as long as everything's working out, why spend money on this? And if they have to decide, you know, in response to this, they're going to beef up their security response, and that's going to take a significant amount of funds, some commitment on their part, which is going to probably involve raising city revenue somehow, meaning fees, taxes, which is always unpopular.
Yeah, taxpayers hate that. And many municipalities are raising taxes to do things like increase salaries and pensions of city workers, let alone putting money into infrastructure to back up your point, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, we're having, in the city I live in, actually, we have a big kind of debate going on over a tax increase to fund a new fire department, which is needed for the growth of the city.
Right. So, I live in a town, right? The same thing, right? You want to have sports, you have police force, fire, like all those things need funding. And I can't imagine if it came on the budget for like IT security, right? I mean, a lot of people don't vote to like give teachers more money, and every city is different. Sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes it might not be, right? And that's why we have the political system we do, so we can vote on it and that kind of thing. But I think you're right, Jason, to have local cities and towns put money into IT security is a really hard thing, because I think many are struggling with just, you know, basic infrastructure and salaries for employees.
Exactly. Yeah, and it gets quite intense at some of these council meetings when they start bringing up tax raises. So yeah, and then you look at the other side of the economic coin here. We've got the attacker's point of view. Well, we've got cities who look like relatively easy targets. They're not putting a lot of money into their IT infrastructure. They've got small staff. They're not going to have, you know, huge amounts of security controls in place and things like that. And it's highly visible to the residents of the city when these services get taken down, because all of a sudden you're not able to pay for your water or sewer, and all that other stuff that you're used to doing. And so people get really upset about that as well. So, while but on the flip side of that, most cities do have some reserve for things like emergency. And when all these services get locked up, I would figure that falls under the emergency category. And so it's really tempting for the city to look at it and just say, well, let's just pay the ransom, hopefully get our data back and get back to business. For example, the city of Rivera Beach, Florida, paid $600,000 to recover their data out of a data breach. And they followed up. There was another city in Florida that like the week later paid $500,000.
I think you can build a pretty good security program. Of course, you have to rebuild your data if you didn't have good backups, or if the backups were also ransomware, factors into the equation. Now, as
Absolutely.
a side note, I did sit down with Roman Sanikoff. Did I say that right? Yes, Roman Sanikoff at Black Hat 2019. Roman does a lot of research into the attacker trends and attacker underground. Actually started as an interpreter for Russian in the FBI. And I asked him very pointedly, like, why are they conducting these ransomware attacks against cities and towns? Is it to be disruptive, to get us talking about it, to spread FUD, and have our nation-state adversaries cause disruption, or is it for profit? I mean, the answer was essentially both, but you want to check out that interview for some great insights from Roman.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, and Paul, as you made the comment about recovering from it, rebuilding systems and stuff like that. The cities do have their choice. They can pay the ransom and hope they get their data back, or they can just decide to go on their own. Smaller cities, they probably don't have the resources or the experience to go ahead and do that. Maybe they can get something from the state, right, but they're not really going to be prepared for this.
Plus, the
cost,
like you're saying, is not just rebuilding everything, right? But it's the time and resources spent rebuilding everything, and then that's resources that aren't working on other things, so you have to compound all that together.
Yeah, exactly. What I was about, the city of Baltimore, for example, recently had their incident with this. They decided, no, we're going to rebuild everything, tell the citizens that, you're not going to get any fees for being late because the services are down and stuff like that. It had a reported price tag of $18 million.
Yeah, that was a big bill for Baltimore.
Versus $100,000, which was the ransom demand. Right. If you're a small to medium-sized city and you read an article like this, what's more appealing to you? I do find it interesting about what happened in Texas. When I read this, one thing that stood out to me is that they had the central reporting. They had all of the cities reporting into the Department of Information Resources, or DIR, as I think of it. It's kind of rude, huh? But regardless, they were able to report it in and start, gathering up some assistance from the state and the federal level. And obviously, it sounds like there was some preparation here. I expect this is going to be pretty expensive, but at least these cities, 23, aren't left on their own at this point. So maybe the idea of having the states set up this type of coordination, it sounds to me like a reasonable idea. They typically have more budget for this sort of thing. And obviously, some states have already done this. I know from talking to Doug, Rhode Island has done some work in this realm as well. But others have probably not gotten to that point. As these attacks appear to be a trend, states and cities really should start getting prepared now, looking at how they would recover from a ransomware attack. Do they have their backups in a situation where they can't get deleted or encrypted themselves, and make sure that they're ready, or at least know who to call when the time comes. I think we'll be seeing much, much more of this. And yeah, that interview, what was his name again? I'm sorry.
Roman Sanikoff from Recorded Future.
Roman Sanikoff. So yeah, go check that out, because I think that would be a fascinating listen to see what's going on with why this is being targeted.
Yeah, and also, I've worked with many universities and municipalities as well. There was always a great debate over how the infrastructure should be built and what the reporting structure is, right? Should you let departments and or cities and towns manage all their own infrastructure? Statistically, when we did that, and there's actually many universities that have published stats on this. One in particular, Marcus Random mentioned the person who did it. I don't remember exactly which one, but basically like the rate of compromise from departments and within a university that had their IT centrally managed was much lower than departments that tried to do it themselves and were not being centrally managed. Now you take that model and you put it inside of a municipality. It could be a model. Obviously there's a lot. It's much more scale, or maybe similar scale depending on the size of your university in your city or town, right? Where you can benefit from some centralized management. And having worked at an organization called Ocean that would help all the nonprofits, for example, in Rhode Island with IT, internet access, and security, one of the services that makes sense to me to combat this is start at the top and start programs that go down from federal into state into cities that give them really good backup services, right? I mean, that's what we did in Rhode Island. We would say, if you want backup services, we'll set up the infrastructure, you pay it as part of your fee, and you do the same thing in universities, right? You can offer interdepartment or inside the state services. The most obvious one to combat ransomware is a decent backup service, right? I mean, it's not 100% foolproof depending on how it's set up, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Certainly beats trying to rebuild transactions one by one, which I believe is what Baltimore had to do.
Right. Sure. Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for appearing on this episode of Hack Naked News. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.